Dag nabba, find it if it goes through the meat. We all know it's guaranteed it's gonna stop you. Ain't no doubt about it. Look at that, folks. In the meat means you going down. That's right. Hi everybody, welcome back for another video. I get this question a lot. Live tissue is not the same as dead tissue and vice versa. And I get this a lot because people want to do ballistics. And everybody wants to know what happens when you shoot a round ball, a less lethal projectile against a human body. And they want to avoid shooting actual people, so they want to come up with an alternative. And shooting dead tissue or a dead animal is a very logical, it sounds reasonable, but when you really get into it and you think about the context of what you're shooting, it's very different. Dead tissue is going to be dead cells. The dead cells have differences in their membranes. They start to break down. The mitochondria is breaking down. There's a lot of necrotic cells, a lot of tissue and debris. And as a result, the dead tissue also starts to get stiff. It changes its texture. It's not soft and it's not pliable like live tissue. Live tissue and your human body, for example, is filled with water. Your cells need water. Your tissues are full of water. And in dead tissue, especially if you're buying something from the supermarket, it's already been processed. A lot of time has gone by. It's starting to get dried out. You've got a lot of dead cells. Almost all the cells are dead by that point, by the time you actually have purchased it and brought it home. So when you do your ballistics testing on a piece of dead tissue, it's really not representative of shooting a human. A human is going to be much more able to take a hit, a little more spongy and a little bit more resistant, and that is definitely not going to penetrate the same way as shooting a piece of dead tissue where it's just stiffer and easier to penetrate. So don't be fooled by pieces of pork or ribs or steak or this or that. And if you shoot it and those projectiles just go right in there or go right through that piece of meat, do not believe that that's exactly what you would get on a pectoral muscle or one of your back muscles or anywhere on a human body, because it's simply comparing apples and oranges. So that's one of my pet peeves about ballistics. Not a lot of people are actually shooting dead animals, so luckily they're not wasting their time doing that, but I have seen some folks doing that. I hear a lot of anecdotal information from people who say, oh, I shot so-and-so and it penetrated and it really busted up some of the ribs, and I even put on some clothes over the top of it, and yeah, it was very impressive. And yeah, it does punch, and you are going to get a punch from those less lethal shots, especially if you're getting the joules up there, 30 joules and up. You're definitely going to be punching pretty well, and you're going to be hopefully deterring someone if you're using your less lethal launcher in the right way to distract and deter and to get away. But just keep in mind, the biology of live tissue is very different. In order to grow cells in the laboratory, we have to put them in a dish that has the right amount of CO2 in the air. It's got to have the right pH in the media. We've got to give it amino acids and various nutrients and glutamine in the media. And we've got to put in some sort of growth factor from some serum. Usually it's from a cow, like bovine growth serum. Or fetal bovine serum. And that's how you grow those cells, and they're happy. And when they die, you know it very quickly because the media will change color, it'll turn yellow, the cells will lift up, and if they're attached to a plate and they're very happy, they'll lift up off the plate, they'll ball up, they'll change their morphology, and they'll start to die very quickly. And there are various viability dyes that we can use to stain those cells and tell if they're alive or they're going to die or they're already dead, just based on the permeability of their cell membrane, also their mitochondrial function. We can measure that, and that's also an indirect measure of metabolism as well. So you're comparing a dead tissue to a live tissue, and it's just not representative. So that's one of my big pet peeves about doing ballistics like that. The other is why do we Why do we have folks who okay, you shoot a human being. I've seen people do that. I've talked about it. I don't want to talk about that necessarily anymore. But I see people who will then go and shoot a ballistic dummy head. And out of curiosity, okay, let's find out what happens if you shoot that dummy head. Well, everybody knows that if you shoot someone in the head and there's enough joules, probably 15, 20 joules, it's going to cause some severe damage. You might kill someone. So what do you really learn by going any higher with 30, 40, 50, or shooting it with a rifle for that matter? I see the firearm channels doing that all the time. In that case, it's particularly relevant because you might need to do a headshot. You might need to do that to stop someone. With a less lethal tool, a lot of folks will say, well, worst case scenario, if I have to, I'll do a headshot as a last resort. And I guess you could make that argument. I guess you could say that. But at the end of the day, when we're using our less lethal tools and we're figuring out exactly how we're going to approach our self-defense, I do believe that our less lethal launchers should be used for less lethal purposes, and that it is sending the wrong message just blasting it out there for anybody to see. I don't care who they are. Maybe it's people in the community, maybe it's some people in the government. But you're blasting out a message that these folks with these less lethal launchers are interested in shooting people in the head, and look at what it does. And you're sending out a very pro-lethal message, which is very hypocritical and counter to the less lethal community and the message that we're supposed to be putting out there. We're supposed to be talking about less is more, trying to save lives, trying to bring down the amount of force that we use in order to match it to the force that's more common and more prevalent among what we will actually face in real life. Lethal force incidents are very rare, and even those cases where lethal force is used, most of the time it's considered to be not practical or not reasonable use of force. So there's a lot of risk in going there. So why would we as less lethal users choose to spend our time thinking about headshots, thinking about wasting our time on ballistic dummy heads, or waste our time shooting inanimate objects or pieces of meat? The only reason that I can think of that people would do that is for pure entertainment value, and it's just sort of speculative, and it's just sort of eye candy. And if that's what people like, that's great, but I don't think it provides real information that we can use. It doesn't provide anything to help me understand how best to use, how, when, and where to use my less lethal launcher. What's the best way to carry it? What's the best way to approach transitioning between something like pepper spray or an air-powered launcher or something more lethal as needed? And how do you go back and forth? And what's your game plan? And all of those issues. Those are the things that really provide you traction and support your actual game plan. So that's just my 2 cents about ballistics in general and a lot of the targets that people want to target. I've talked about wood, I've talked about metal targets, inanimate objects and things like that. But when you try to go to just things that you think are going to replicate human, it's just kind of misguided. In fact, I would rather you just go back to the old FBI gel and let's just use that and let's try to look at penetration, because at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. That is sort of an indirect measure of the amount of force, and you can sort of visualize the force. Instead of getting a joule reading, you can actually see some distance. That's all that really represents. It doesn't necessarily represent penetration in the human body when you're doing less lethal round projectiles. It just doesn't. If it's a firearm and it's firearm ballistics using bullets, then it is a surrogate for penetration in the body and how deep you can get in and what vital organs might be hit and how much cavitation and damage you might do. But with a less lethal, it's literally just a visual representation of the amount of energy of that projectile. That's pretty cool. So if we could, as a community, get more uniform and standardized in terms of the ballistic gel that we use, then I think we could really make a lot more conclusions as well. But I don't think we need anything more than that. That's just my opinion. Let me know what you think. I know everyone has different perspectives. Everybody take care. See you next time.